Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon Podcast. I am Ed from BourbonObsessed.com, also known on Instagram as Bourbon_Obsessed. I publish bi-weekly newsletters featuring the latest bourbon news and releases, and also do this podcast for your listening pleasure. I am here again with my friend and bourbon aficionado, Dean Langdon, and we will be discussing the latest bourbon and other whiskey releases from the last 2 weeks. Dean, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Ed. I'm always glad to be back, and there's some interesting releases we get to talk about this week. They sort of span the whole spectrum of things you can do with bourbon, right?
Yeah, we have a pretty wide variety here. You have anything interesting this week?
Oh, not too much this week. We're getting ready for the Memorial Day weekend, and other than maybe taking an afternoon off to go hunt for bourbons that I don't need, that's probably the only thing I'm going to be doing this week.
Oh, did you go to Total Wine? Didn't they have a release?
Total Wine had a release this past Saturday. I did not make that. I don't want to discourage your readers, but I went for a run that morning instead of going to get bourbon. So I don't know. I'm not sure I'm qualified anymore.
Because you were still up from the previous night from just finishing your last bourbon.
Yes.
Okay, we have to make it a good story for our listeners.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, yeah, we didn't make it either. We were in Bardstown. It's a little bit of a haul to come back, and to get the good stuff, you have to get
they had 50 bottles, and there was really one of them I wanted, and that would have meant being one of the first 4 or 5 people in line, and I'm never one of the first 4 or 5 in line, and so
I assume people got there at 5 p.m. or whenever it closed.
Yeah. So I don't know. Again, we missed that one. We'll be around for the next one. So.
All right. Hey, let's dive right in. So our first one is from Filmland Spirits. So Filmland Spirits has released Moonlight Mayhem 2, The White Port Wolf, a limited edition 7-year-old straight bourbon finished in white port casks. It's made from a mash bill of 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. This expression is bottled at 94 proof and priced at $64.99. In keeping with the Filmland Spirits creative process, this latest expression was inspired by an original B-movie concept. Moonlight Mayhem 2, The White Port Wolf, continues the saga of star-crossed lovers on the run, Tommy and Sylvain. Having reached Napa Valley, the couple unknowingly trespass into the territory of the mythical White Port Wolf, and Tommy is wounded. Will our heroes escape, or will they continue to battle the terror of terroir? Only a sip will tell. It's a good story, which is why this one was long. I had to include all of that.
That's right. Right. Yeah, the terror of terroir is hard to say, especially 3 times. This is a blend of Kentucky and Indiana bourbons, I found when I dug a little bit deeper, which is why they don't call it Kentucky straight bourbon. It's just straight bourbon. But it's really neat. On the website, they have a little trailer, a film trailer, an animated film trailer. They've got a storyboard with the story. They've got a little bit of a script. And I don't see that as a gimmick. I see it as we're really trying to blend the art of film and the art of bourbon, and I like that blend culturally.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting concept. I actually have never had any of the bottles of theirs, but I've tried them at the KBF. Have you tried them?
That's the only time I've ever had them too. I've tried them at KBF last year, and they were fine. It's hard to. Things don't always make a lasting impression at KBF because there's so many impressions.
No,
they don't always stick. But I remember enjoying it at KBF for sure.
Well, I certainly remember all the video, the movie themed things in their booth.
Mm-hmm.
And, didn't they have people in costume that were serving? I don't remember.
They might have. And their labels are always wonderful. They've got
their typical B-movie poster.
Yeah, a B-movie mock-up. So yeah, I'm glad they're hanging in there, and I'm not sure about the white port cask finishing, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Well, I think didn't we talk about white port cask recently for something? I've had 1 or 2 that were.
Yeah, I don't think I have. We may have discussed it. Now all I would have been able to tell you is I haven't had one.
I believe the Blackened by Wes Henderson, that one. I'm pretty sure it was white port finished.
Yeah.
I thought that was actually very good. And I feel like there was another one more recently. I mean, there was the 15 Stars triple port, and that has white port as one of the ports in there, but it's not only white port.
That might be the one we talked about, because I do remember discussing a little bit of that triple port.
Yeah, that's actually a really
stars.
good one.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
But, all right, so let's move on to our next. So our next is from Frey Ranch. So to mark a decade of distilling, Frey Ranch Distillery has introduced the Harvester Series 10th Anniversary Edition, a limited release American whiskey made from 5 grains grown exclusively on their Nevada farms. Co-created with master blender Nancy Fraley, this 121.14 proof whiskey showcases a complex blend selected from over 100 barrels and 14 mash bills. Only 500 hand-numbered bottles are available, each packaged in a custom silo-inspired box topped with a recycled metal tractor cap. Its suggested retail price is $249.99, and it's bottled at 121.14 proof.
And so I was curious what the 5 grains were. So that was the first thing I looked for. And of course, there's corn, there's wheat, there's rye. It's a winter wheat and a winter rye. And then there's barley. And the 5th one is oats. But there was no real, there was no percentage of grains that I could find. But you don't hear much about 5 grains in our world.
No. And oats are supposedly pretty difficult to work with.
I would think so. I mean, they just don't, I don't think they malt or ferment like corn, wheat, and rye. They're going to be a little bit different. So.
Well, I think they make like an oatmeal-y paste, so it really gums things up. I mean, everybody says rye is difficult to work with, but I've heard that oats are very difficult to work with.
I've seen Pogue Distillery in Maysville did a 4 grain with oats, but it was like 1% oats. And I think I've seen some others where it's 1%. And so probably you get, to your point, 3 or 4% oats, you're going to gum things up so much that it's going to be not feasible to try that.
Yeah, I mean, I think some places have used considerably more oats, and I think they're the ones that talk about how difficult the oats are to work with.
I think it's great that they got Nancy Fraley to help blend this.
I can't remember if she's been with them. She probably has been with them. I mean, she's involved in so many distilleries.
She is. I got the impression she was sort of like in as a guest. I mean, their master distiller, Russell Wedlake, was also involved in this, as were both the Frys, Ashley and Colby. So it looks like the 4 of them sat down together on their website. That's the way it looks, and sampled through these 100 barrels. What a difficult task, and came up with this blend. And so obviously, I mean, to get 500 bottles out of 100 barrels there's a lot of other distillate out there that they're going to be using and packaging somehow. But I can't fathom that process and how time consuming and detailed that must have been.
Yeah, well, the $249.99.
It's at a perfect, it's at that price point where, and the other thing I saw was you can only get this at the distillery and in some stores in Nevada. So I hope that they send one to you to review, Ed, so that we can see what it's really like.
That would be nice. We'll see.
Time will tell.
All right, our next couple are from Heaven Hill. So Heaven Hill Distillery has announced the spring 2025 edition of their Old Fitzgerald Bottled in Bond Decanter Series, and this is a 9-year-old Kentucky Straight Bourbon whiskey distilled in spring 2016 and bottled at 100 proof. This limited release features a green-labeled ornate decanter inspired by 1950s designs, continuing the brand's tradition of seasonal color coding. The suggested retail price is $129.99 for a 750 milliliter bottle.
So this will be easier to find than the Frey Ranch, and it's a better price point. But other than that, we know it's going to be good because it's a Heaven Hill Old Fitz product. Good luck finding one. They go quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
we just sent Nick to get a bottle.
Good boy. No, yeah, I mean, so it may be easier to find, but it's not going to be easy to find.
Right.
And, it's interesting. So these are slowly creeping up in price as well, because for many years, these Old Fitz decanters were doing the $10 a year pricing, and now we're up to a little more. So it's a 9 year, so it should be 90.
This is among the younger ones that I can recall. I mean, I think there have been a couple that were younger, but I mean, we know we've seen, 18, 19-year-old Fitz decanters. So
there's no 18, I don't think. There's a 17 and there's a 19.
Okay.
And there's an 8 is the youngest that it gets, because younger than that it becomes the 7-year-old Fitz that's supposed to be the shelfer that's due to be released pretty soon. But no, there've been a couple of 9s. Yeah.
What's the other Heaven Hill product we got?
Well, the other Heaven Hill product is Heaven Hill Distillery has released the second edition of its grain to glass Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, a 105 proof small batch made with Beck's 6225 corn grown by Peterson Farms. The 2025 release highlights the brand's seed to glass commitment and coincides with the launch of Family Farms First, a new initiative supporting American family farms through a partnership with Farm Rescue. Heaven Hill will donate up to $100,000 annually to assist family farms facing hardship through that program. And it's bottled at 105 proof, and this I thought was interesting too. It's priced at $99.95 for a 700 milliliter bottle. Now, I don't think last year's were 700 milliliters. I think they were 750s. So,
yeah, I think this is the first time it's been 700, and you and I are seeing more 700 ml bottlings come out. That's, I think, been the standard in Europe and probably other countries for a while. But it's a little bit less bourbon, right? I mean, so how do you factor that into your price decision?
Well, you don't. The price tends to stay the same, and the bottle shrinks by 50 milliliters.
Right, just like cereal boxes, folks. So, so I did some checking on this charity that they're supporting, and it looks like it's a really good pick. They help with farm disasters, and so they'll go and they'll plant, they'll harvest, they'll feed cattle. It looks like it's an airline pilot that founded it. And I went down so far as you can look at their financials on their website. So that's the my financial geek piece took over, and they have multi-million-dollar revenues every year. What was really interesting to me is very little of that is spent on programming and fundraising, less than 10%. That's a good charity when the money's going towards the purpose and not being spent to inflate salaries and markets. So the only negative I saw, Ed, was that they don't serve Kentucky. They serve 5 states, but 9 states, but Kentucky's not one of them. So maybe Heaven Hill can get them to expand and provide their services here in Kentucky.
Would certainly seem appropriate since they're a Kentucky brand and this is Kentucky bourbon.
Yeah, and $100,000 is not a small amount of change, right? So that's got to be one of their bigger contributions, I would think. And so bring it on, Farm Rescue.
Yeah, no, I looked into it briefly as well, and it did look like a very worthwhile charity. I didn't pick up on the not Kentucky part.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so I mean, this will be interesting. The other thing that's interesting about these is last year it came out as a rye bourbon, a wheated bourbon, and a rye. There were 3 in this series, and this year it's only coming out as this rye bourbon. It seems. I don't. I mean, if there were going to be 2 others, they would have been announced at the same time, I'm assuming, because they came out as a set last time.
Yeah, that is interesting, huh? So yeah, that's a pretty substantial pullback as far as different flavors, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and it's I mean, they're interesting because they use different hybrids of corn every year, and that's why this one is that Beck's 6225, and the Peterson Farm is a family farm that's here. So everybody that's involved, the grain people, Heaven Hill, and the farm are all family businesses like Heaven Hill. So they're trying to keep it, so that's the kind of businesses that are involved in this process. Right.
Yeah, and I like that about Heaven Hill. I mean, we see that more and more. I mean, Heaven Hill, Maker's Mark is very, very locally oriented. You get to a point, I can't imagine that all the grain Heaven Hill uses comes locally because they've got to go through so much. But if they can use as much locally as they can, that's really helping the local farmers and the local economy. You got somebody to, I've got a friend who does trucking for grain farmers. And so, somebody's hauling that grain to the distilleries and somebody's hauling away, the spent grain to feed cattle. That all those people are making money, and there's a nice economy.
I believe this is going to get that estate certification as well.
It sounded like it, yeah, and that's a good thing. I wonder. I guess you can get that for particular bottlings, or do you think it has to be the distillery as a whole?
No, I mean, because Makers is doing it also for the wheat whiskey.
Okay.
So, no, I think you can pick. Well, it's working that way at least.
Yeah, so,
That
yeah, it sounds
can,
like
you can pick individual
pick a
whiskeys that
particular
are
whiskey. Yeah.
going to be adhering to the requirements. I think the pricing and the bottle size are a little interesting though, because what this got some flack for last year and didn't sell anywhere near as well as I think Heaven Hill thought was it was priced at around $100, and these are 6-year bourbons, and as we've talked about in the past. The recent past,
right.
6 is like the new 4, and there's many that are coming out for under 50. I mean, this is going to have a little higher expense to it because of what it is, but I think consumers don't honestly care all that much about the cost that went into things. They more care that the price of a 6-year is now closer to $50 most of the time. So, the fact the price stayed the same and the bottle actually shrunk a little bit, and it's still a 6-year distillate, and I'm a huge Heaven Hill fan. I've got tons of it, and I really like the distillery and everything they produce. But I think the price point of this is going to continue to cause problems for it, because because the other thing is the economies of scale. Even though this is a more rare hybrid and it's grown differently and things like that, everybody figures Heaven Hill can make a 6-year bourbon at a significantly lower price. Certainly the price point that Bardstown Bourbon Company or somebody else is doing. So, I think it's never going to get the love when it's.
I think that's an interesting take. I mean, just look at other Heaven Hill products. I mean, you can now get 10-year-old single barrel Henry McKenna for $60, $65, right? I mean, value wise, I understand this is grain to glass and all that, but boy, that's are they selling the sizzle instead of the steak here, right?
Well, that's the thing, and it's a tough sell to the consumers. That consumers are interested in the price and does it taste good. I'm not sure they are as concerned with what it costs to make it,
or that it's going for a charitable cause. You might get some people to buy for that. I mean, we have, I forget who it is that does stuff with Ducks Unlimited. I mean, you're seeing some charitable pairings. We had D. Robinson's brand a week or so ago that was helping with jobs for youth in Baltimore area, but I think that only goes so far, and Heaven Hill has so many other, shall we say, better priced products. I agree with you. It could be some of this on the shelves for a while.
Because as far as I know, I've been there within the last week, and I'm pretty sure at least some of the last year expressions are still around at the distillery. So that's always a interesting thing when the new release comes out and
the old ones are
prior
there.
ones are still there. Yeah,
it is right.
So we'll see. I mean,
that probably was not what they planned.
No, I do not think it was received in the manner that they thought. But I think if it had been priced like $70 or so, or even less, because for that you were supposed to, most people bought the whole set, so you're already multiplying it by 3.
Right.
So if it had been $70, people probably would have gone for it. $200 for 3 bottles or something. But yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I think maybe that is why there's only 1 coming out instead of 3. But still think it a little lower price and not a smaller bottle might be a little better received.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. It's uphill to go to a smaller bottle and a higher price. So
yeah. Well, price is the same, but I mean it's effectively.
Well, yeah, it's right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, our next one's not inexpensive either. So it's from Old Commonwealth Distillery. So Old Commonwealth Distillery resurrects a little-known classic with the 2025 release of D.H. Cromwell 15-year bourbon, a bold Kentucky straight bourbon aged 15 years and bottled at 106 proof. It's inspired by the legendary Dirty Helen Cromwell, that's the DH. This limited edition release blends 4 select barrels made from a mash bill of 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley from an undisclosed heritage distiller. The bourbon is then rebarreled in Kelvin Cooperage barrels for an additional 6 months. A portion of the proceeds will support, here's another charitable part, support Refuge for Women, honoring Helen's charitable legacy. And as we said, it's bottled at 106 proof, and the suggested retail price is $2.99. And if this is like the other similar releases of this age from this distillery, these will sell out online the second they go on sale.
Yeah, and I don't think it's this one, so I don't know that this is just available. It's not a club with this, but it's like you say, it's online, and there probably is a VIP thing where you might be able to get earlier access. But I agree this will. I mean, there were only 4 barrels. It didn't tell us how many bottles there actually are, but you're not going to get that many out of 4 barrels. I'd love to know. So they rebarreled it with Kelvin, so I assume that's where the 4 barrels came from. But I wonder how many barrels they started with to get to the 4 that they rebarreled. But in any event, that's what, 800 bottles more or less.
More, because usually when you fill them up, it'll be full. So
Sure.
If it's freshly double barreled, then it's not going to lose very much in 6 months. So maybe at least 900, closer to 1,000.
Maybe
possibly.
1,000. Yeah. And you get into that age range, north of 15 years. You're appealing to an audience that's willing to pay $300 for a bottle. And to your point again, a charitable cause is involved here too.
The Cromwell stuff has hype around it, so because the other releases have sold out like immediately and then gone for 3 times as much on secondary. So I suspect this will go down the same route. I mean, I'd like to try this. I don't think we're going to have the opportunity, but certainly sounds good. And then I don't know if you read much of the stuff about Dirty Helen, but she's quite great. The history.
Yeah, I mean, she was quite the lady. Apparently ran a speakeasy during Prohibition, ran a brothel. And was not cautious about using swear words. It was sort of a badge of honor to come in there and get cussed out, right?
Well, it sounded like that became even more of a thing when she opened legal stuff after,
right?
Which is what's interesting.
Yeah.
But she was charitable. She sent like a whole bunch of people paid their college tuitions and all these other kind of things. So it's nice that they're attaching this to a charitable cause as well.
Right. Yeah. And this charitable cause does serve Kentucky. It's only in 4 states, but Kentucky is one of them. So there's that. That's a good plus on Old Commonwealth's behalf there. So I love what they've tied together. The character of Dirty Helen, the cause they're supporting, and it sounds like excellent bourbon that you're going to be lucky if you get one.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, I could have made this paragraph much longer because that press release was really long with the story.
Right.
But don't want to bore our listeners, so you can actually read it on bourbonobsessed.com. So our next one is the World Whiskey Society has unveiled a new 12-year-old straight bourbon whiskey finished in black currant brandy casks as the second quarterly release for its World Whiskey Society subscription members. This limited edition bourbon was distilled in Kentucky and made from a mash bill of 78% corn, 13% rye, and 9% malted barley. It offers a complex profile influenced by the dark fruit and spice notes imparted from the brandy cask finish. It is bottled at 104 proof, and we didn't get the price specifically for this, but the price for the subscription is $150 per quarter, so we're assuming that's what the bottle costs, and it's the only way you can get it. It's not unlike what we reviewed the other day.
Yes. Yeah, you have to be in their club, and it's easy to become in their club. It's just signing up, and apparently that's pretty easy to do. But
I think you have to pay the quart.
Yes,
you have to pay.
You got to pay.
The other club, I think you didn't have to take the bottle.
I think that's right. Yeah, and so here you're gonna pay $150 a quarter is the way I looked at it, and you're gonna get a bottle every quarter. Hopefully you're gonna want that. So
yeah.
When I looked at their site. And this morning, there were only 32 bottles left available. So what that tells me, I guess, is either surely they've got enough members to buy all of this, but I gather you have to choose it, that maybe you don't automatically get it. So, yeah, again, that's a little bit unclear. But
yeah, because I thought this was one where you paid and you got it.
I thought
you didn't have the choice.
I thought it looked that way, too. But if there were still 30-some left, does that mean they need 30 more new members?
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah, so maybe they do. So, folks, hey, go to World Whiskey Society, sign up, get yourself a bottle. Tell us about it when you do.
Yes. Our next one is from Southern Grace Distillery, and it's also known as Whiskey Prison, and they're down in North Carolina. I actually visited them a couple of years ago. It's actually a pretty cool place. It was a prison. They announced the latest release of their Conviction Naranja. This release consists of their 4-year-old Conviction bourbon finished for 3 years in Vino de Naranja casks. I believe that this is the oldest and longest finished version of this expression ever released, because they've done it before, but it hasn't been 4-year bourbon, and it hasn't been 3 years, is a long time.
3 years is a really long time in a VDN cask, yes.
So according to the distillery, the fully matured bourbon and extended finishing period creates a richer, fuller profile than previous Naranja releases. It's 104 proof, and the price was not provided, although it was starting to be released at the gift shop starting May 10th. So maybe it is on their website now, but I guess when I did this initially, it might not have been.
Yeah, and I looked on their website and I couldn't see a price either. So that was this morning, Ed. But I mean, I've had other VDN finishes. I like that concept. I'm not big on finishes, but for some reason, orange and bourbon just is a nice marriage. 3 years does seem like an awfully long time, and I wonder at what point does the orange become overpowering. I don't know. If we try this one, we'll be able to tell.
I'm not sure we're going to get the opportunity.
You need to get to North Carolina, my friend.
Yes, I do have a bottle of their Conviction bourbon, but it's not a 4-year. It's from a couple of years ago when we were down there, and I do have a bottle of the Penelope Naranja, but these will be different.
Yeah,
but I'd like to try it.
The website said it. The palate has notes like dark chocolate and candied orange, and so those are really, strong taste. Think about the chewy candied oranges you'd get as a kid, and
it'll definitely have a very full taste because they're pot still, and unless they've changed how they were doing it, they're doing everything sort of that old moonshiner's way, where the whole mash and fermentation all takes place in the same vessel.
Okay,
and so it's going to be a full bodied pot still bourbon. So with 3 years of finishing. I mean, that's a lot of flavor in the bourbon that needs to be stood up to. So, maybe the 3 years was really needed. And, I mean, I suspect it's going to be good. We'll have to get down to
sounds like
prison.
It sounds like a nice blending of taste and age. So
yeah, I haven't tasted the bourbon when it was this old. I think most of them were 2 when I was down there or something like that. So it should be significantly different.
Well, and technically this one's 7 years now, right? I mean, it didn't change from a bourbon once it went into that VDN cask. It's just getting finished, though.
Right, and whether the age counts for an age statement or not, it's 3 years old.
That's
it did make a difference.
Yep.
It's been in a barrel, so it tastes different than a 4-year bourbon.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so our next one is from McBrayer Legacy Spirits, and they announced their latest annual limited release of Batch 5 of W.H. McBrayer Kentucky Bourbon. Batch 5 is a blend of 12 barrels of 5- and 7-year-old bourbon, bottled at barrel strength with a 106 proof finish. They use locally sourced grains and an interesting mash bill of 88.4% Bloody Butcher corn, 5.8% Heritage rye, and 5.8% malted barley. It's priced at $100 for a 750 milliliter bottle. And I thought this was interesting too. It's available online for shipping, or you can to 40 states, or you can order it online and pick it up at Revival Bottle Shop up in Covington, which is convenient for people that live in the area.
Yeah, that is nice. Shipping bourbon is great. It expands markets, but it's always nice just to go pick a bottle up, I think. And I saw that this is like 2,700 bottles, so that's a pretty good yield from 12 barrels of bourbon. It looks like I saw in digging into this that this mash bill came from the back of a letter Judge McBrayer wrote to E.H. Taylor back in the day. So that's an interesting twist. That's why there's some uniqueness to that mash bill, in addition to the percentages of how that splits. That's a lot of corn.
Well, a lot of corn, and it's all Bloody Butcher, which has quite a bit of flavor in itself. Mm-hmm. So, I'm interested to try.
That's right.
Say that after every single one.
We'll have to get up to a Revival and pick a bottle up.
Well, I bet they'll have it on their tasting bar.
Yes, I think you're right.
So we could probably try it.
Right, which is always good.
Because they've had it before. It's the only other. Because I've tried some of the other releases up there, so I'm assuming this one will be there. I know that there's a Revival in Elizabethtown that's more convenient when
I did not realize that.
Wow. Huh. Yeah. It opened, I have no track of time anymore, but I think it was like 6 months ago.
Okay.
I don't know, we were at the ribbon cutting
Neat. Well, that's neat. Yeah, I mean, I like Revival's concept. You know, they've got.
Funny you say neat, because the Neat opened in Bardstown just this Thursday.
What a great lead-in, right? You know.
Yes.
Yeah, but isn't Revival? Don't they also have a fair amount of Dusties?
Yeah, I mean they're similar concepts.
Yeah,
I mean they're not located in the same places, so they don't compete. Because they're in Covington and Elizabethtown, and Neat is in Louisville and now Bardstown. So. Yeah,
it's good to see. I mean, we've talked on other podcasts about, there might be a little bit of overcapacity right now as far as distillation goes, but I still think the tourism aspect of bourbon is here to stay and will keep on growing. And it's places like Revival and Neat that spur folks to come to our beautiful state and sample all sorts of different bourbons that they just probably can't get anymore.
Yeah, I mean it's very cool to have the opportunity to. I mean, it gets pricey, so you can't do it all that often. But it's
right.
But they sell them in smaller pours that they can sell for prices that are more reasonable. So it does give you the opportunity to try them. Yeah, I like both those places.
Yeah.
All right, and then our final story comes from Pursuit Spirits. So this is interesting as well. So they're introducing an expansion of their Pursuit United lineup with new 88 proof and barrel proof expressions of both. Okay, I'm a little tongue tied here. Of both their bourbon and their rye whiskeys. The 88 proof bottlings offer approachable flavor profiles at a suggested retail price of $39.99 for a 700 milliliter bottle, while the barrel proof bourbon at 119.8 proof and the barrel proof rye at 121.2 proof deliver cask strength complexity for $79.99, also for 700 milliliter bottles. The original 108 proof expressions will also still remain in the lineup as well. So they're going to have 6
They're going to have more shelf space.
Yeah. And that's not including the toasted and the other
double oak
other things
those.
that they have.
Yeah.
Right, double oak, not toasted. Anyway, so coinciding with these releases, Pursuit Spirits has unveiled a refreshed custom bottle and updated label design that clarifies the product identity and elevates shelf presence. The labels will now prominently feature triple mash bourbon and triple mash rye, highlighting the blending process involving 3 different mash bills that define these core products. So a lot of news there.
There's a lot going on with that. I mean, they're clearly making an effort to expand shelf space and to take a bigger share, expand the product line. I mean, they started out with just a very basic, I don't want to say basic, but just a bourbon and just a rye. They've always been blenders. And so, and they do it very well, in my opinion. I like their products. I like this new bottle. I think it's a nice refresh. Again, they're going to the 700 ml size. Mm-hmm. We're just going to see more of that, folks. But I like the shape of it. And I don't know. I wish them success. I hope that this rolls out. They're getting, they're expanding on price range. They're expanding a little bit on product as far as the barrel proof stuff.
Well, I think the going down was the thing, because I mean they already sort of have the quote bourbon geek crowd like us. I mean and the people that are used to drinking higher proof things. Yep. So that's where the 180 is staying. And so obviously those same people are gonna buy the barrel proof things. But what they didn't have was anything that appealed to the lower proof drinkers. So I think putting an 88 proof out there is very smart. I mean, that's going to get that whole market of, everything else that's in the, 80s or low 90s.
Yes. And at a fair price point, right? I mean, $40 is there's got to be a broader market at $40 than at, 80.
I mean, we lose sight of that most people prefer that drink bourbon, drink the lower proof whiskeys. They don't drink 120 proof stuff.
They don't, right? And it's interesting though, because I can see some of the folks that like the higher proofs, the 120s, 130s even. They're going, oh, that 108, that's nice, but can you come out with a higher proof product? And so here you go. I mean, Pursuit has answered the bourbon geek call and come out with barrel proof versions.
Yeah, and that's also smart because that was their original audience, but they realized that you have to appeal to a wider market if you're going to be successful.
Right.
And the other thing with that size is, I guess, I don't know if they have any plans to sell overseas, but it sets you up to be able to go to those other markets. And then the markets that tax based on proof, having a lower proof version also makes that more appealing. And then let's not forget that most of the other whiskeys in the world are not at 120 proof.
Right.
They're closer to the 80s and low 90s, and some would be considered strong for their styles if they even get into the upper 90s.
Right.
So, there's a lot of, I'm sure they're thinking of the future with this and thinking of, might as well, if you're going to redesign,
Yeah, no, I think they are. I think they're good at forward thinking. I'll digress. I had a tasting a week or so ago, and we worked our way up proof. The first was up like 94, and we ended with in the 130s. But the 94 was the Evan Hill product, was Elijah Craig 18, and it was just I went through all these different samples and came back to that at the end. And whenever you go up in proof and you then drop back down, you tend to lose some flavor and some of the other attributes, but it's still hung in there.
Well, there's a reason it's at that proof, I think, and it's, all the cynical people say it's because of cost, but I don't think that's true. I mean, people complain about Elijah Craig 18 being low proof and being too oaky, but if that was at 130, can you imagine the degree of oak and tannin?
It wouldn't be drinkable.
Right. So I think it's at that proof because that's the proof that it was thought to drink best at. Now, obviously, it makes it go further.
Well, sure, that's right.
But I don't think, we'd all like to try it. I guess I'd like to try it at barrel proof.
Right, exactly. Right.
And decide for myself. But I think, I think there's a lot of reasons. I like Elijah Craig 18, and
I do too.
I think it's a very good bourbon.
Yeah. Well, so let's go back to Pursuit for a second, and we got to wrap up, I know, but the triple mash, it's basically 3 different mash bills. I know traditionally they've used a Kentucky distillate, and I want to say they get a lot of stuff from Finger Lakes in New York, but it wasn't clear to me exactly which 3 mashes they were using in all of these.
Well, I think that's what they are. They're Bardstown Bourbon Company, Sagamore Spirit, and Finger Lakes.
Okay.
I don't know if there's other distilleries involved in some of those, but that was because they have so many expressions now.
They do, yeah.
But that was I thought that was their standard for both the rye and the bourbon. I could be mistaken.
That sounds right. And if anybody would know,
bottles literally right behind us.
If anybody would know, you would. So that's the whole idea. So yeah, they've done a great job of selecting good distillers, getting some of their best products, and then blending them in a masterful way, I think. So I wish them all the success, and we just got to get a couple of their listeners to come over to our podcast, right?
Yeah, just a couple. So should we talk about the bourbon the whiskey that we're drinking?
Yeah, because we've been sipping on a nice whiskey that we talked about a while back. This is Ship's Bell whiskey. I think they say it's Ship's Bell bourbon, but Ed and I are a little bit too persnickety for that. It's
well, they do say blended bourbon whiskey, and remember that blended bourbon category allows anything.
There you go.
So technically, if you drop the blended part off, you could call it bourbon, but but blended bourbon. This does not have grain neutral spirits, but I mean you can put grain neutral spirits in. But what Dean was getting at before I interrupted him was that it's we'll just read the back of the bottle because it just says it. So Ship's Bell is a unique blend of Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey with American single malt whiskey aged for 2 years in No. 4 char virgin oak casks, and they give the mash bill for the bourbon component is 73% corn, 21% rye, 6% malted barley, and the bourbon's from Bardstown Bourbon Company. And I'm not clear where the single malt comes from. If they make it themselves,
I got the impression they make their own single malt, and that's what's in there. And so, and I think you had to do some investigating to determine that it was Bardstown Bourbon Company. I think they just said a Bardstown Bourbon on their website.
Well, they said Bardstown Distillery. I read to them. They wrote back right away and sent me the bottle.
And it's tasty.
It is. I like it, actually.
I like it. It's I forget what the proof point on it was.
I don't think it's particularly high.
86, yeah. So it's...
But it's got quite a bit to it.
It does, yeah. And I think the malt whiskey, their single malt, helps with that. I mean, as a general rule, 2-year-old bourbons are going to be a little bit thin, maybe even a little bit rough. There's no roughness to this.
No, it's got a very nice flavor. I mean, maybe it's a little corn forward for
it is.
A column distilled bourbon, and that's the youth that's in there.
Right.
But then you do get this little bit of graininess and malt character from the American single malt that's in there, which really adds more body and flavor to it. Honestly, reading about it initially, I did not know what to expect. I was thinking it might not be that great, but tasting it, I actually like it quite a bit.
It's better on the palate than on the page, folks. Okay, give it a try. I mean, it really is. I was not expecting a lot either when I read about it, but they have done a nice job of blending these two together, sort of to bring out the best of both of them.
And I'd have to go back through our newsletters, which is pretty easy to do, actually. But as I recall, this was at a fairly low price point, wasn't it?
I think it was, yes. Yeah.
So
I don't know how broadly it's distributed. They're out of Connecticut, I want to say, and I'm not sure it's nationwide distribution or not yet.
We could pull up the press release, but I mean, I think I remember similar that it was more regional distribution at this point.
Yeah.
So
it's tasty. I'm getting some nice apple notes there, a little bit of tea, and of course, like you say, the corn, the malt.
Yeah. Yes, it's very nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Shipspell, for sending us Well, actually, that's not the name of the distillery. The name of the distillery is Veritable Distillery in Connecticut, if anybody's interested in looking for this. But yeah, it's if you're a fan of a little bit of a lighter, sweeter bourbon with a little bit of, and it's not a grainy single malt. It's one of those lightly grainy with more of the fruit character to it, I think.
I agree. Yeah, it's not. It doesn't have the what I consider the beery malt taste that I sometimes get.
Yeah.
With malt whiskeys, it doesn't have much of that at all.
So it's a nice combination. If you live in the states it's distributed in and it sounds good to you, I'd definitely give it a try. I'm enjoying it quite a bit.
I agree.
Alrighty, well, Dean, that about does it for this episode. I hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Bourbon Obsessed Bourbon Podcast. Be sure to join us next Monday for the Bourbon and Distillery News Podcast. We've already got quite a bit that we're going to talk about. Also, be sure to like and follow us at your preferred podcast provider so that you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to tell all your friends, too. You can also head over to bourbonobsessed.com to check out some of our over 300 bourbon reviews and over 50 distillery write-ups. While you are there, you can also sign up to have my newsletters delivered directly to your inbox. Finally, I can also be found on Instagram at bourbon_obsessed and on Facebook at Bourbon Obsessed, and would love for you to follow me there as well. Dean, where can they find you?
They can also find me on Instagram at Dean of Bourbon. By the time this podcast comes out, they would be able to see I went to a bourbon dinner this past week and also a tasting at a friend's house. And so those posts will be up. You can see what kind of things I've been up to. And thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great week. Cheers.